General Motors has officially acknowledged what many analysts have been warning for months. The US car market is slowing down fast, and the ripple effects are already hitting automakers across the board. GM has confirmed massive production cuts on several of its most popular models, including the Silverado, the Equinox, and even the Blazer, due to ballooning inventories that dealers simply can't move. What's even more alarming is that this isn't a short-term adjustment. According to insiders, GM is bracing for an extended period of weak consumer demand heading into 2026, as rising interest rates and tightening credit conditions crush affordability for everyday buyers. In its latest earnings call, GM quietly admitted that dealer inventory levels have reached their highest point since 2020. In some regions, lots are so full that dealers are parking vehicles in overflow fields and empty shopping center parking lots just to make space. Silverado and Sierra trucks, once the company's crown jewels and Pachadias, are piling up faster than they can be sold. Retail sales for GM's full-size pickups have dropped by nearly 18% compared to last year, while SUV sales like the Blazer and Equinox have fallen between 12% and 20% depending on the market. What's driving this slowdown? Simply put, buyers are tapped out. After years of price hikes, higher loan rates, and shrinking trade-in values, the average American family can no longer afford a $60,000 truck or a $50,000 SUV, and GM is feeling the pressure like never before. To make matters worse, GM's ambitious electric vehicle plans, once hyped as the company's future, are also hitting serious turbulence. The Ultium battery program, which was supposed to power everything from the Silverado EV to the Cadillac Lyriq, has faced major delays and production bottlenecks. GM even confirmed that several EV launches have been quietly postponed into late 2025, citing supply chain adjustments and market realignments. Translation: sales are weak, production costs are high, and demand just isn't there. The Silverado EV, once touted as a Tesla Cybertruck killer, has sold only a fraction of what GM expected, forcing the company to rethink its production targets and reallocate resources toward hybrid models instead. Behind the scenes, dealers are sounding the alarm. Many are offering massive discounts, sometimes as high as $10,000 to $15,000, just to get vehicles off the lot. GM has even started offering hidden incentives to dealers to push volume quietly, avoiding a public price war that could spook investors. But the truth is impossible to hide. GM is cutting prices because they have no choice. The market is flooded with unsold vehicles and consumer demand is drying up. Financing costs are choking buyers, and with average new car loan rates hovering around 9%. Monthly payments for even mid-tier models are now over $800. It's unsustainable, and GM knows it. This isn't just a GM problem. It's a sign of a much bigger industry crisis. The same economic forces hitting GM are slamming Ford, Stellantis, Toyota, and even Tesla. But GM's confirmation makes it official. The bubble has burst. The company's top executives warned investors that the US vehicle market is entering a transitional correction phase, a fancy way of saying that sales are going to slow down, profit margins will shrink, and layoffs may follow. Production cuts at key plants, including those building Silverado and Equinox models Dignity, have already begun, with some shifts reportedly canceled for the remainder of the year. GM's stock took a hit immediately after the announcement, as Wall Street reacted to what many saw as the clearest sign yet that the post-pandemic auto boom is over. Analysts are now slashing forecasts for 2026 and 2027, predicting a prolonged period of weaker demand and lower pricing power. The irony is that GM spent years chasing record profits and EV expansion dreams, but now finds itself drowning in excess inventory and declining consumer confidence. Buyers aren't lining up for $70,000 electric trucks. They're waiting for prices to fall or turning to used vehicles instead. The once unstoppable push toward electrification has suddenly hit a brick wall of economic reality. And perhaps the most shocking part of all this is how fast things unraveled. Just 1 year ago, GM was celebrating near-record profits and bullishly predicting double-digit EV growth. Now, the company is confirming that it's scaling back EV investments, deferring production at its Ultium battery plants, and even exploring partnerships to share costs. Dealers who once couldn't keep inventory in stock are now calling for factory shutdowns to stop the bleeding. Some are sitting on 120 to 150 days worth of unsold vehicles, an inventory nightmare that's costing millions in floor plan interest alone. But the situation goes deeper than just production numbers and financials. It's about consumer sentiment. And that's what really has GM worried. Americans are losing confidence in the economy. Inflation remains sticky, wages haven't kept up, and auto loan defaults are quietly rising. When buyers can't qualify for loans, automakers like GM are forced to either slash prices or accept shrinking market share. And right now, GM is trying to do both. Cut prices to move units while holding on to what little margin remains. It's a strategy that can't last forever, and the cracks are only widening. Behind closed doors, GM executives are acknowledging that the company is entering one of the toughest sales environments in over a decade. Sources inside the company have revealed that internal projections for 2026 show a steep drop in new vehicle demand, possibly as high as 20% in certain segments. That's catastrophic for a manufacturer that's been running full throttle for years, banking on endless consumer appetite. Dealers are now facing a grim reality. Many of them are slashing prices far below MSRP just to attract foot traffic, offering incentives like zero-down leases, extended warranties, and even cash rebates that haven't been seen since the 2008 financial crisis. You can walk into a GM dealership today and find Silverados discounted by $12,000, Equinoxes selling thousands below sticker, and Blazers with incentives so aggressive that dealers are barely breaking even. And it's not just a short-term promotional push. GM's internal memos reportedly encourage dealers to clear 2025 inventory at all costs before new 2026 models arrive, even if that means sacrificing profitability. But here's the bigger issue. This glut of unsold vehicles is only getting worse because production and demand are completely out of sync. For months, automakers like GM kept churning out vehicles, convinced the demand surge from 2021 and 2022 would continue. Instead, rising interest rates, now hovering above 7% for auto loans, have priced millions of buyers out of the market. The average price of a new GM vehicle sits at nearly $50,000, while household incomes have barely budged. That means fewer buyers, longer loan terms, and a swelling inventory problem that's about to explode. Meanwhile, GM's EV ambitions are quietly collapsing under their own weight. The company poured billions into Ultium technology, promising a scalable, profitable EV future, but reality looks very different. Battery costs are higher than expected, charging infrastructure remains limited, and consumer enthusiasm has cooled dramatically. Sales of the Cadillac Lyriq and Hummer EV have fallen short of forecasts by wide margins, forcing GM to scale back production targets. Even worse, GM recently admitted that it would delay several highly anticipated EV rollouts, including the Silverado EV's mass market version, due to inventory and demand alignment. That's corporate speak for, we built too many and not enough people are buying them. And while GM was hoping that electric models would carry the company into a new era of growth, dealers say they're struggling to move them at all. Many EVs are sitting on lots for months, some approaching 200 days before being sold. Add in the fact that used EV values have cratered, and consumers are increasingly wary of taking the plunge. The so-called EV revolution that was supposed to redefine the auto industry has turned into a logistical and financial nightmare for GM. The consequences are already showing up in GM's financials. Analysts estimate that GM's profit margins have slipped nearly 4% year over year, largely due to aggressive incentives and declining average transaction prices. And with the Federal Reserve unlikely to cut rates significantly anytime soon, the affordability crisis in the car market isn't going away. GM's once highly profitable truck lineup, the core of its business, is now dragging down earnings as consumers switch to smaller, cheaper models, or simply hold on to their old vehicles longer. The average age of a car on American roads has now surpassed 13 years, a record high, showing just how hesitant consumers are to take on new debt. Even Wall Street is beginning to turn on GM investment banks that once praised its EV strategy are now warning that the company may have overextended itself. Credit agencies are reviewing GM's debt outlook, while investors are demanding clarity on how the company plans to manage its ballooning inventory and delayed production goals. It's a domino effect. One problem feeds another, and the entire auto sector feels the shockwaves. But perhaps the most telling sign of GM's internal anxiety is the tone of their recent communications. The company is no longer projecting optimism or growth. Instead, it's shifting toward damage control. Executives have started using phrases like market correction, pricing normalization, and inventory recalibration. Meanwhile, competitors like Ford and Stellantis are quietly taking similar hits. But GM's confirmation made it official. The entire US auto industry is now in a price war nobody wanted. Dealers are competing to unload inventory faster than their rivals, slashing thousands off sticker prices, adding extra incentives, and even advertising buy one get one lease deals to clear space. In some states, GM's Silverado and GMC Sierra trucks are now being advertised with $14,000 cashback offers, the kind of deals that used to only appear during recessions. And here's the scary part. GM's decision to slash prices might actually make things worse. When one automaker cuts prices, everyone else has to follow. That means thinner margins, shrinking profits, and in many cases, layoffs. Already, whispers from inside GM's production plants suggest that temporary shutdowns and shift reductions are on the horizon, particularly at the Fort Wayne, Indiana plant that builds the Silverado and Sierra, and the Ramos Arizpe facility in Mexico that produces the Equinox. Thousands of workers could be affected in the coming months if the company doesn't find a way to stabilize sales. The EV division, which was supposed to be GM's lifeline, is also under pressure to deliver results. But dealers say they can't move those either. Even with massive federal tax credits, buyers are still skeptical. Range anxiety, high insurance costs, and plummeting resale values have made EVs a tough sell in 2025. The Silverado EV, which GM hoped would compete head-to-head with the F-150 Lightning, is barely moving. The Hummer EV, once a symbol of GM's comeback, is sitting unsold on lots, with some units now being discounted by nearly $20,000. This has left GM in a brutal balancing act. Cut production and risk losing market share, or keep building and drown in inventory. Neither option looks good. And with Wall Street now paying closer attention, GM's leadership is under immense pressure to prove that they have a plan. But what can they really do? The macroeconomic forces, high rates, cautious consumers, and declining EV demand, are all outside their control. What's inside their control is pricing, and that's exactly where they're now making desperate moves. Quiet price cuts across nearly every lineup, secret dealer cash, and regional incentives. It's all part of GM's effort to spark demand without publicly admitting that they're slashing prices. Even consumers who haven't followed car news are starting to notice. Online forums and car buying sites are full of people shocked at how fast GM prices are dropping. Trucks that were listed for $68,000 in the summer are now showing up for $53,000, with even more room to negotiate. It's a complete reversal from just 2 years ago when dealers were charging over MSRP and buyers were lining up to pay it. The market has flipped, and GM's confirmation is the clearest signal yet that the boom times are officially over. But the real question now is what happens next? If GM is scaling back production, discounting heavily, and admitting that demand is collapsing, how will that affect the rest of the industry? Because make no mistake, when a giant like GM flinches, everyone else feels it. Suppliers, transport companies, advertising agencies, even small-town dealers, all of them depend on steady sales. And if GM's slowdown spreads, it could trigger a chain reaction that ripples through the entire US auto economy. And the dominoes are already starting to fall. Suppliers that depend on GM's production volume are beginning to cut shifts and reduce output. Companies making components like transmissions, glass, and electronics are seeing their orders shrink as GM scales back manufacturing schedules. The slowdown is rippling out from Detroit to every corner of the supply chain, from small machining firms in Ohio to steel suppliers in Pennsylvania. These aren't abstract numbers anymore. They represent real jobs and real economy. At the same time, GM's confirmation is forcing banks and lenders to take a hard look at the auto finance sector. With vehicle values falling and loan defaults rising, lenders are tightening credit standards, making it even harder for buyers to qualify for new cars. It's a vicious cycle. Fewer buyers mean slower sales mean more discounts, and more discounts mean lower residual values, which in turn scare lenders away from offering favorable loans. For an industry built on financing, that's a death spiral in slow motion. What's particularly striking is how quickly the mood has changed. Just a year ago, GM executives were boasting about record demand and robust EV momentum. Now they're talking about cost-cutting, efficiency drives, and production alignment. Internally, GM has already frozen certain hiring programs, trimmed marketing budgets. Meanwhile, on dealer lots, the reality is impossible to ignore. Rows of shiny new Silverados, GMC Terrains, and Chevy Blazers sit unsold, collecting dust. Sales staff are back to the aggressive tactics of old, cold calling potential customers, offering special weekend deals, and even delivering vehicles to doorsteps just to close a sale. Some dealerships are even partnering with rideshare companies to offer temporary leases on unsold vehicles, hoping to offset mounting floor plan interest costs. It's survival mode, plain and simple, and GM's situation is now serving as a warning to the entire auto industry. Ford, Toyota, Honda, and Stellantis are watching closely, because what's happening to GM today could hit them tomorrow. The fundamentals are the same for everyone: too much production, too little demand, and consumers who simply can't afford new vehicles. Even EV-focused automakers like Rivian and Lucid are feeling the strain, cutting staff and delaying new launches. What GM has confirmed isn't just a company-specific issue. It's the signal of a broader collapse in auto market momentum. Wall Street analysts are now predicting that the U.S. auto industry could be headed for a correction similar to the one seen in housing during 2008. The reasoning is simple: overvalued assets, inflated inventories, and a sudden drop in consumer affordability. When those three collide, prices don't just drop, they crash. Already, used car prices are plunging as the flood of discounted new vehicles drives trade-in values down. That means even more people are stuck underwater on their loans, owing more than their cars are worth. And when that happens, trade-in activity dries up, strangling the sales pipeline even further. In GM's case, the company is now juggling two fires at once: the conventional gasoline vehicle glut and the EV slowdown. On one hand, it's sitting on too many unsold trucks and SUVs. On the other, it's struggling to sell the EVs it already built. The strategy of build fast and sell later that worked during the chip shortage years is now backfiring. Dealers can't move inventory, and GM can't afford to keep slowing production without sacrificing efficiency. Every day those unsold vehicles sit on lots, GM pays millions in storage, financing, and interest costs. A financial drain that adds up fast. Even more concerning, consumer trust in GM's long-term vision is starting to erode. The company has pivoted its messaging multiple times, from EVs for everyone to balanced powertrain strategies, to now quietly re-emphasizing hybrids. It's clear that GM is reacting to market forces, not leading them, and when a brand known for stability starts looking uncertain, investors and buyers both start pulling back. Some dealers are saying what GM won't, that the company may need to cut production by as much as 30% heading into 2026 to rebalance supply with demand. If that happens, thousands of jobs could be at risk across North America. Plants could face extended shutdowns, supplier contracts could be renegotiated, and dealership networks could shrink. It's the kind of industrial reset the US hasn't seen in years. And it's being triggered by the very company that once symbolized American manufacturing dominance. But here's the twist. Despite the chaos, there are whispers inside GM that the company is preparing something big behind the scenes. Executives reportedly believe that this crisis, as painful as it is, could be used to reshape GM's entire approach, from pricing models to how vehicles are built and sold. Some insiders hint at a shift toward direct sales for certain EVs, similar to Tesla's model, while others talk about a leaner, tech-driven GM that focuses less on volume and more on high-margin vehicles. Still, that's the long-term vision. In the short term, GM is fighting to stay afloat in a market that's turning hostile by the day. Truck prices are falling, EV sales are stalling, and interest rates are suffocating consumers. It's the perfect storm. And GM's confirmation was just the lightning strike that illuminated how deep the storm really goes. And as this storm intensifies, the pressure on GM's leadership is becoming almost unbearable. Investors want answers, workers want job security, and dealers want direction. But the company can't seem to provide a clear roadmap. During GM's most recent quarterly briefing, analysts pressed Mary Barra on when the company expects inventories to normalize and profitability to recover. Her response: "We're taking a disciplined approach to align production with real-world demand." It sounded calm, measured, and reassuring. But behind that corporate tone lies a simple truth: GM doesn't know when the bleeding will stop. On the ground, the situation looks far less polished. In cities like Dallas, Detroit, and Phoenix, GM dealers are reporting 140 to 160 days of unsold inventory, double the industry's healthy level.